Well, hello and good day to you all. My name is Dimitri Frederick, and you're watching Voices for the Voiceless, a Frederick Media production and a subsidiary of Frederick Capital. Today is October the 26th, 2012, and today's show is entitled, What is the Bottom Line? And from today's show, we're going to look at 6 key issues that's been going on for the last, you could say, a year and a half, 2 years, as this 2012 election goes on. So there's a lot at stake. And, I think we have a lot to look at, what is really the bottom line as we go to vote this coming November 6th. We're about a week away from finding out if we're going to continue on with President Obama as our incoming president or have Romney become our president of the United States of America. So it is so important, the key issues that are at stake, that I wanted to go over some recaps of things that you may not even think about in detail to look at, really, because sometimes there's so much politics that go on and less truth going on between knowing what's in your best interest from the information that's been given out to you during these debates over the last 2 weeks or so. So the first topic we're going to talk about is job issues. The job market has continued to struggle and goes almost like a ceiling of trying to reach a number that's reasonable for the rest of America to be satisfied with. We went from 8% job resistance to now it's dropped down to a little about 7.8. Not much of a difference, but it's just a few thousand jobs, and especially for those who did get hired, it's been a tremendous amount. But there's more to it than meets the eye, And the key thing is, for you who are searching for a job, to understand these things, there's a lot of fudging of the numbers as the Romney camp has, or you could say the Republican Party has come to discuss more that, Obama's numbers could be being fudged by the departments, of labor. Well, guess what? This has been going on for the last 4 years, and actually I should say the last 8 years, because while Bush was in office, that's one of the main issues that was concerning to me, that during the market crashes, a lot of the numbers, economic numbers that was coming out, the job data, the GDP numbers, all of that was telling you that the economy was doing better, when in fact it wasn't doing better. So, fudging the numbers from the Republican standpoint to the Democratic standpoint doesn't really matter, because it's always been done before. So for the Republicans now to use that as an excuse, regardless of the numbers going down, doesn't make a difference, because both sides does it on a regular basis. So I want you to be aware of that. But the other key thing to know about the fudging of the numbers is that, it's very important, looking good by fudging these numbers, because what happens is that unemployment numbers vary from state to state. So yeah, overall, the nationwide, this is what the average is. But fortunately for your state, depending on where you are, if you're in a tough economic situation where the job market is tough and struggling, or maybe you're going through a change right now, yours might be higher than the average person, and that could be a good thing for you. Let me explain why. Because if you are right now looking for work, and you're collecting unemployment, and your unemployment has expired, like most people who's gone for a good 6 months, guess what? You get an extension, maybe for the first time. But your extension, whether or not it's going to continue for a third or fourth time, if there is going to be a fourth time, will more or less depend on the state that you live in and what is the average unemployment is. So when Congressman Ryan was talking about 10% unemployment in Pennsylvania, well, guess what? That puts that state in a better position for those who are unemployed to maybe potentially have a better chance of getting continued unemployment benefits being given to them. And for those who, like myself in Massachusetts, and others who may be unfortunately to live in Massachusetts, the unemployment numbers is about 5 or 6%, which means that, if you are someone who currently is not working and facing unemployment issues, this coming end of the year, it will probably be very vital to your financial future, because it will determine, again, who comes into office or not, because whether or not that person, whether it's Obama or continuing with that, or Mr. Romney, will determine the sensitivity of that person to know that, hey, listen, there's a key issue at stake, whether or not to continue giving benefits to those 7.8 million people, or excuse me, a percentage of people who don't have jobs or currently looking for jobs. But the other factor to this information that you know about fudging the numbers means that, you know what, with the numbers being fudged, there's another thing that's happening, because those who have given up, what you hear about talk a lot in the news, well, those who are collecting part-time income usually don't get counted. So other times, those who have exhausted their unemployment benefits and not going to get any continuation, that's another factor of the fudging of the numbers, because those people don't count for anything. It's like they're off the radar, off the screens, all off any data, because the system refused to count it because it makes them look bad. So again, it's not an issue of whether or not the Republicans are doing it, the Democrats are doing it. Both parties do this. So be aware of that, when you're deciding who to vote for, and knowing what is your, congressman, what is your senators, what is the person that's about to be elected believing, especially if you are someone in a position of looking for work and trying to get unemployment benefits right now. Would they more likely in favor of continuing that unemployment benefit for you, or are your family going to find yourself struggling to take any type of job, or maybe have some cutbacks in your financial future? So those are relevant things that you should think about when you're looking at the job market. Now, let's go into talk about abortion, because abortion is a big issue that you heard the debates have gone on over and over, and you've heard Ryan and Romney's viewpoint as well as Obama's viewpoint, and this whole issue of Roe versus Wade. We're going to get to more of that in a little bit, but overall, the abortion issues, has a lot of mixed emotions, because it's a hard thing to think about that you want to terminate a life in the process. But here's what I'm going to say, because I'm not here to take sides and try to put one viewpoint over the other. But I'll just say this, from having gone to that struggle of, where do I stand on this issue? Because it is a tough issue, and there's no right or wrong answer to this. It's just about your personal choices. And me as a business person, and also as a spiritual person, a practicing Christian, I do have a belief system in this, and also have a viewpoint to say. But again, it's just about your choice, looking at what's important to your family. And me, I look at things from a philosophical standpoint, so that helps me in the decision and sharing with you my viewpoint from this stand. And it goes back when I was in high school, actually, because I used to be a very strict, anti-abortion person until I was forced in a debate class in high school to debate the opposite, which meant I was pro-choice. And I really had to do my job, which is not just, because I was for anti-abortion, that, being in a debate, you don't have the choice to say that, well, I'm not going to debate that. Well, I really did my research and reflected a lot on the issue. And here's what I came about, and that's what I want to talk to you for this few minutes. And it's that, again, looking at things from a philosophical standpoint, you have to understand that there's more issues than just about, you killing a life or not. Because I look at look at the world globally and the struggles of financially supporting a child and other things you have to take care of, emotional stability. And looking at today with the kids raising kids, which is a big issue of mine, and I have a lot of shows, topics that I plan to do in the future about these issues. You know what? Are we really doing no justice to these children? Because I really consider the real abuse that's going on today is this single moms, that's teenagers, that are popping kids left and right. Because who's really supporting them? Is it them, their parents, or the parents of that parent, of that child? More or less, it's really the government supported, because there's a system, and I think there's a system game going on, and I don't mean game of gameplay, but mindset game that's been going on for the last few years that we have not paid attention a lot with about abortion. Because today, honestly, within the last few years, if you think about the last decade or so, how many times have you heard the people talking about, aside from this election going on right now, that people are talking about, I want to give my baby up for adoption, or I want to give my baby up for abort my baby? You rarely hear a child who's a teenager talk about that. So what has changed over the years? And what I think has changed is the determination that there's a system in place that's going to support you regardless of what you do. And that support is you as a taxpayer having the burden. And I really believe that this is one of the crises that's really damaging, destroying, and breaking down our financial system, because it's like the government has become the child support agency for all of our children's who having children at the same time. So the issue, when you look at a deeper meaning of, the choice, you got to understand from that standpoint too. Is it really a choice of just having a baby or not having a baby, or are you looking at the 18 to 21 years of financial commitment that you have to make to that child? Because today's parenting, and when I say parenting, I'm talking about even a young boy. Really, what is his stake? Is he really involved? And majority of the time, our children who are teenagers are not both parties involved in the raising of that child. It's usually one parent, and which goes back to the single household of a child. And there's a lot of economic issues that's facing that one single household. And that's what I want to get to right now. Because I recently watched a show called Freakonomics. And I was really blown away with the information I got from that show. It was a documentary by two gentlemen that really spoke about the whole idea of abortion and what he has done by having the limitation of someone's choices to terminate the baby or continue to have that life. And that person, the two gentlemen, they went back and compared Roe v. Wade versus Germany, I believe it was the case, law where a president many years ago, this is I think in the 60s or 70s, banned abortions throughout the whole country. So that president came into office believing that everybody should not have the right to terminate their pregnancy. And what happened showed a drastic comparison between what the United States, when it actually enacted Roe v. Wade, and also currently today, when there was a time of reduced violence, reduced drug going on, and all these things that was going in a positive direction. Crime was down, robberies down, so people had a choice from Roe v. Wade in the United States. And, one of the things the news media was trying to take credit for it, and also the politicians, Bill Clinton was in office at the time as they compared this interview, as well as Mayor Giuliani in New York, and they were taking credit for why crime and all these things that, nuances has taken place, has gone down in numbers. And what the documentation of Freakonomics talked about showed the comparison between the United States, where Roe v. Wade was in effect, versus what Germany happened, which is by the limitation of women being able to have the right to terminate their pregnancy. What you had was a bunch of children that was born out of wedlock, out of a need for love and care and desire to really nurture that child to adulthood, from childhood to adulthood. Then you had also neglect, you had abuse, you had other issues of abandonment, basically the child being neglected, and basically lack of education, or dropping out of school, or going towards a life of crime. So those were the two comparisons that they gave in that documentary. And what really stood out to me was that, wow, by you giving that woman the choice to make that decision, she has the ability to love and really give the care that's necessary to that child. And that's what it really is about. It's not about two politicians in two different sides talking about what's in favor or not and making a choice for a woman, which, I totally agree with Obama and the Democratic Party talking about that we as men, we as leaders in politics or in different positions, whether that's in the workforce, should not have any decision to be making over a woman's life. And that's where I stand personally on that topic. But when you look at the deeper issue, from my debate classes in high school as well as to today, and also the example of Freakonomics, you have to understand that there's a bigger issue at hand. What is the overall impact in our society by people having the limited choices? One of the things I talk about lately with the women is that you're going to see an increase of backdoor abortions, dead women laying in the alleys because they are illegally having these abortions taking place. And these are things that happened in the 40s and 50s. Do we really want to go back to those days? And that's what's at stake right now by, you making a decision of who to vote for, who to put into office. So don't think that your vote don't count. It really does count tremendously, because it will impact the women in your life, whether it's your mother, sister, or whoever that may be, even be a friend or so. So those are things I want you to think about when you think about the issue of abortion in this election. Okay. The next thing we're going to talk about is the NRA. You know, the NRA, it's a tricky topic because this year in this debate for 2012 presidential election, you don't hear too much of the NRA. And that's because of the shooting that recently took place in Aurora, Colorado. And so with the amount of violence that's been taking place and automatic assault weapons, there's a lot of people who are still mourning the loss of their loved ones. And so, you know, traditionally, the NRA has always been a Republican voted, supporting side. Never been really a Democratic side, at least since I've known it, So you don't hear much, and I know there was one reference in the debates, whether or not, the control of automatic rifles has been put, as far as trying to pass laws and so on. Here's the real deal. It's never going to happen. And also on a personal note, I have people in my life, friends, business friends I know that are in favor of gun control, of having guns. Hey, I'm not a shooter. I don't believe in weapons, at least having weapons in the house. But at the same time, there's a whole lot of people right now whose only issue with whether or not they decide to be voting for Democratic or overall looking at the issues at stake versus Republican Party is the issue of gun control. And I'll say to those people, listen, Obama, whether or not he was a president or not, the White House, the business industry as a whole, people's compassion, all the violence is going places, people getting shot up, it really doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, the NRA is more powerful than any one of you guys combined. So whether or not, politicians want to debate, argue the point, or downplay it, it's all a joke, because really no one can do anything, because NRA feeds money usually to the Republican Party. And one of the key points when Romney was asked the question about Massachusetts, one of the fact finders said, listen, the whole thing of gun assaults, automatic gun weapons, was banned and has been now removed from Massachusetts, as a thing. And I bet you this, I bet you the NRA say, if you want our money, you need to get rid of that law. And that's really the bottom line, because the NRA is that powerful. There's nothing that can stop the NRA, just like the tobacco industry. They're two industries that are so powerful, they themselves can become their own entity. That's how I see it. So that's the real deal, So really the power is on the NRA side as well as the Republican side, but most likely they're getting funding right now to the Republican Party without too many people making fuss about it, because Obama cannot do anything. Because regardless, he could say all he wants to be politically correct, at the end of the day, no one's going to change the NRA. The choice, again, goes back to raising, and I think Romney made a good point during the debates about, really the home values that you have for your children, gun safety, gun education, and all these things that come about owning a gun and having access to a gun comes to play. Because really, we are the one that makes the decision whether or not to carry a gun, whether or not you think you're safe by having a gun, or just trying to protect yourself. Overall, the less guns we have, the more lives that will be saved. So again, our reaction is quick when we anger to actually react by pulling out a gun versus talking things over or having a civil discussion versus going to violence, because shooting anyone and taking anyone's life is nothing to squawk about, because it's something that's serious. So for those who are looking at the NRA, as far as, will that change? Will there be a law to stop the amount of violence and control over our streets and the amount of weapons, especially automatic weapons? And when you look at the police department, who's lacking the resources to even have the proper equipment to protect themselves with bulletproof vests or anything like that, it's an issue that's going to continue on to the next term. So it doesn't really matter what you think is going to happen, or you could pass stiffer laws. There's always loophole, because again, money always dictates what happens in the White House, as far as lobbies and laws being passed and whatnot. So again, keep that in mind as you make a decision in this year's election. Next, let's talk about the gay vote. the gay vote, is not talked much about. That was early on in the debates. Whether or not, how people feel about, gays being able to marry, this and that. Again, that's a personal choice. But, one thing I want to put out there is to be, upfront and again, look at the realities of what we're facing, both from the Republican and Democratic side. The Republican has always been a conservative, voting member, versus the Democrats are more compassionate and looking at more of, everyday, middle class needs. And so, and also moving with the times is what I always say when you look at the Democrats and how Democrats vote and the causes that they go for and believe for. And so the gay vote is no different from that because, there's a reason why President Obama actually supported the gay vote a few months ago. And the reason, and even back last year, because I have a show that ready to do, eventually I'll be airing it soon. But the gay vote is a very important vote. And unfortunately, it's something that the Republicans should take a side on, because if they really want to get elected, and want to get a good large majority, just like the minority vote, or you could say the Latino vote, the gay vote is as important as any other vote. And so that's something that in the future, the Republican Party definitely need to take a look at and reconsider their position, because the gay vote has power and it has money. And that's why it's important when it comes to election. There's never been a time where people can unite. Sadly and unfortunately, when you look at the black community, that has been one of the hardest things when it comes to voting, to get that large majority of black people to come together and vote for maybe a President Obama or someone else, or like they did Bill Clinton. Because, this election is very much as important as 2008, when we got a large majority of people in the black community to go out and vote. Being that it may be a black person for that reason to be voted, or for someone who had a true agenda to help this country get out of the mess that it's in with a new philosophy and so on. But understand that the gay vote, President Clinton did it and supported the gay movement, and as well as President Obama has changed his philosophy from 2008. So that is a change that he's made. And it's a change in a good rate, regardless of your viewpoint. Like he said, you know what, I'm in favor of family, just like I am too, but at the same time, I have to respect the people's rights, for their choices, the freedom. Just like we'll fight for freedom of abortion, to choose life or to abort life. Likewise, it is a choice, and you have to respect that choice. But most powerfully, when it comes to a presidential election as this, the gay vote is a very powerful vote, and is actually a majority vote that will determine, and I honestly believe when it comes to President Bill Clinton's election, from both 2004 and 2000, I forgot the exact number of years, but when he was in his terms, it was actually his vote that really determined him winning in a landslide, you could say. And you could say 2008 Obama's election was about the same thing. That gay vote, as well as you could say the black vote, probably helped him propel him to the level he's at. And I think that factor will come into play again, because there's never been a true the party that really support and look at the needs and the wishes and respect of the gay community as a Democratic Party has always done. So the gay vote, it's a business strategy, it's a marketing strategy, and it's a presidential strategy to choose to support the gay movement and get the gay votes on their side for this coming election. So in regards to that, where you stand, again, it's about choices that we make and also where the future is moving. You can't alienate, you can't eliminate any one person, because the gay movement is a strong movement that is going forward. It's not something that's here today, gone tomorrow. So we as a people, we need to embrace that and also find the best president that will continue to embrace these changes, regardless of your viewpoint, but it's again respecting people's humanity, human rights at the same time. So let's talk about healthcare. Healthcare has been, you could say, maybe the question, the issue throughout this election about, where is healthcare going, the overall burden of the Obamacare bill that's been talked about. And you heard the debate. I'm going to talk about something a little different, of course, but what's funny about this whole issue, and I hope I had wished more that Obama would have spoken more in detail in referencing that Romney's Massachusetts, that he's so proud of, debating over and over about his health care bill that he passed in Massachusetts, is very much the same bill. There's a few changes, and I've watched many news shows and other people's debates on the topic. It's very much similar. So I don't know. All joking aside, it's kind of hard to not joke when you hear Romney talking about he's going to eliminate and get rid of Obamacare. Because really, what are you going to get rid of? Because unless you plan to get rid of all of the things or changes that you made on your bill in Massachusetts, really, what are you changing? Because it's not much difference. I think they said on average it's 4 to 6 things that's different about Obamacare from the Romney bill. And also, so a little fact and trivia, that it was Ted Kennedy and Romney in Massachusetts during those days that actually helped pass this bill in Massachusetts. So, when you talk about healthcare issues, there's a lot at stake aside from these little nuances of, back and forth rhetoric about, getting rid of Obamacare. But what I want to talk about is what would happen after 2015. There's a lot at stake about the fiscal cliff, this country going bankrupt. Well, aside from those other things economically, from the stock market or, austerity issues going on overall around the country, the healthcare issue is one of those things, in fact, that will bankrupt this country. And I really look at by 2012, possibility, because by 2015 the clock starts on the baby boomers retiring, and you know what? They will be the one that's going to use healthcare the most. Why baby boomers need a universal healthcare is because of the demand, the high increase. That's one thing that has never gone down, is the intensive need for more healthcare providers, more nurses, more doctors, and so on. Because the baby boomers are known for being the baby boomers for that one reason, because they are the largest population living right now. So therefore, when you look at where healthcare is moving towards, there is a tremendous need. There's going to be a tremendous burden, stress, I say, on the government, on the industry itself to provide proper care, and that cost will increase. So if you don't mitigate the issues at stake and look at, okay, just like gas prices, we complain all the time about how much money the gas and we're putting in our cars, and the gas pumps keep going higher and higher. Where's the relief? Well, I think by 2015 the government will have to carry healthcare like every other major big country or small country has done. It's kind of ironic when I look at and I've seen Michael Moore that's done documentaries about other countries providing healthcare, and here in the United States, the government itself is the only one of major countries that's not providing healthcare for its own citizens, versus having private companies, like we have in the United States, providing healthcare. And the reason is because it's a multi-trillion-dollar industry, and guess what? All these big businesses in healthcare don't want to give it up. And what I'm concerned about is that by the time 2025 come around, healthcare will be a bankrupt and will be given to the government to take care of. So let's get real. I want you to imagine this with me, that your elderly parent, well, maybe yourself who is elderly, maybe watching this, are trying to do research on a healthcare provider with Romney's voucher program that he's insisting on doing. Having been in IT, which is my background, this will be like my mother looking for a new job after having been laid off and being told that she has to submit her resume online. What do you mean resume online? The traditionally you used to hand out a paper to a job for application for any position that you want to. Today, it has changed. So imagine you try to tell an elderly person to do the same thing, go online, do research. Or better yet, today if you are trying to do research online or anywhere, it's kind of mind-boggling. So imagine an elderly person trying to do that. So the insurance company, you're going to go to as an elderly person, going to say, in order for you to get information about a doctor, go online and download the white pages for that doctor, because we actually don't mail out papers as much as anymore, because we have cutbacks. So you want to do research, you got to print the PDF, or call somebody, which is what we're going to do next. There's no more yellow pages to go look up a doctor. It's basically a white pages online now, that's available to you. You can't really call maybe phone 111 to ask for information about a doctor. So why would you do that to the elderly? Make it hard for them to find information. It's hard enough for my mother to file an online application for a resume without me getting involved to helping her. Imagine you're going to have a doctor being online, registered online, and to the boards and so on, to be available for that elderly person to try to research, or being put into the system saying, go ahead, you have to renew, every year or something like that, or maybe a voucher that expires, or how long the voucher will be in place. You have to get all this information. They don't have the time, they don't have the patience, and it's too new technology for them to handle. So there's a lot of people that's going to be lost in the shuffle. And that's what we're doing to our elderly. If you really consider having a voucher system in place, maybe that's something that has to be think about. If anything, that the elderly person will ask their friends for a referral. Imagine that, instead of finding a competent doctor in the area or field they need to care for. Imagine your friend, and this is how we always do with referrals. Maybe a podiatrist, or heart surgeon. Two different things. But you know what? We ask for a doctor. And of course, that elderly person who may have an elderly friend who's using a doctor may say, hey, go ahead and call this doctor. But is that doctor credible enough, or is an expert in the field of need for you as a patient coming in for a different need versus a heart issue or maybe a foot issue? So those are things at stake, and the things that will, if anything, damage or hurt more people in trying to find the proper care they need versus knowing your provider that you have currently and trying to change the whole program. So again, healthcare, there's other issues at stake. You've seen the debates overall. Again, it's your choice. Again, this election 2012, you need to make the choice of which plan seems best for you going forward in the next few years. The next thing we want to talk about is the war on terrorism. The war on terrorism is a never-ending war, and really, it's not ever going to end. And here's why I say that, because when President Bush Jr., to be exact, said that we are going to go find Bin Laden, go find Saddam Hussein, and then afterwards go search for terrorism. We're going to be, the country that's in the forefront of fighting terrorism. I don't know if we really thought about what we're making ourselves, or how big of an issue, because the search for terrorists is a never-ending process. And the problem right now with issues in Libya right now, Syria and Iran, all these things, many years ago, one of my friends, we had a discussion about why they didn't go after Saddam Hussein the first time when Bush Jr. had a chance to do so. And his answer was very serious and very truthful to me, that it resonated within. And the answer is simply this: for every devil that you kill, there's a new devil that's going to come out. And you better know that devil first, that you're comfortable with, that that has some kind of self-conscious, or follow some protocols, let's say, versus having a devil that's erratic, just crazy per se, and have no sense of judgment, So you put in someone who's, basically just reactive to things versus being proactive to things. And so that's what you're seeing today, by making a choice to get rid of both Saddam Hussein and Bin Laden. You have so many different people who are outraged, who are angry, and anything goes. We have history that proves that. Guess what? Even from my country, as a Haitian person, Haitian American, after Papa Doc, Duvaliers, all these leaders come about, they rose from chaos, with lack of leadership. The military stronghold took over, and those who have the loudest voice is the one that gets heard and the one that takes leadership roles. Guess where that came from also? The Nazis, Hitler. Hitler came to rise from the same process of hatred, anger, and basically with the loudest voice. And that's who led. And that's what's happening right now. So you could say there's somewhat infighting, which I've done a show to talk about that as well. A lot of infighting going on within these sects of terrorist groups and about who's going to be in charge. And basically it's an issue of who's going to be the baddest, who's going to be the badass to actually sit there to commit the worst crimes, kill the worst amount of people to say, well, I deserve to be leader. And that's what's really going on right now. And so, you could say who you want to get into bed with. Someone you know already, that's an evil person, versus someone you don't know, and you don't know what they will do. And that's why there's so much chaos going on, where you're constantly hearing, death tolls going up, suicide bombings going on, because the war on terrorism is too big of a scale. And I support President Obama in the sense of trying to condense this whole idea of terrorism, because you could spend billions upon billions of trillions of dollars too every single year trying to fight the war on terrorism. You gotta decide, what war do you want to fight in? And after some point of time, which is 10, 12 years now, you have to decide that enough is enough. Because you, as a country, will go bankrupt trying to fight this war on terrorism, And I think it's a hard call, but protecting your homeland is what's more important. But fighting a war that will never end is even more difficult, as bodies come home every single day of death tolls as it continues to rise. And people don't know anymore what is the point of what we're doing. We know we're fighting a war to protect our lives, but who are we fighting for? And what are we fighting for? And that's what it comes down to. This country will go bankrupt. It does not stop at some point in time. That's the bottom line. So Biden said this, and he was clear in his statement that there was no budget plan or exit strategy for this war that we got ourselves into. And that was the case of President George Bush Jr.'s decision to continue a war and expanding it to fighting terrorism. I don't know what your word definition of terrorism it was at the time, but we need to understand that this terrorism needs to be cut down, shut down, or come to an end, and fight battles when it needs to be fought, not constantly defending countries and putting our soldiers at risk every day for a senseless war that has no end in sight, no real conclusion. This big question is, can we afford more dead body bags coming home? And the answer, we can't. It's too much, and there's too much at stake for us to continue fighting this war. So whether or not you believe that President Obama's track record of moving forward and trying to keep us out of wars and actually put an end to this war by 2014, like I said, 2014 may never be an exact time frame, whether or not whatever the deadline month that it was given, but understand that we always will do what we need to do to protect this country from terror, from any enemies that will come across our borderlines. But at the same time, continue fighting other wars, because you never know what's at stake. I've done a show talking about Iran and how serious Iran's situation is of having weapons of mass destruction and all the capability to produce it, because they don't have to be the one holding the weapons, you could say, or the eggs. They could spread the eggs to many countries and make them more dangerous than Iran's considered to be right now. And so, like I said, we're still at the earliest phases of Iran's situation. So again, that's more wars, more battles we have to face in the future. And so, one thing for sure, there's major world wars, there's major battles every couple of years or decades or even centuries that centuries that we may even face. But to continue on for 12 plus years is ridiculous, and it needs to end. So this brings me to the conclusion of today's show. There isn't one, really. Remember that this is your bottom line, like I've said over and over throughout this show. This election is a difference between the lesser of two evils, or two devils. Why do I say that? Because the issue is at hand will be here after November 6th, and will still be here 4 years from now. What won't change are the real critical issues facing our country within the next 3 years to come. That's the baby boomers, the fiscal cliff, and all these other issues that I've talked about in the past. I said this before. President Obama was even elected and was even considered as the candidate for president. Whoever is elected will be a guinea pig for the next 4 years due to damage President George Bush Jr. left the overall office in. But I also knew that whoever was in office will need 8 more years, or a total of 8 years, 2 terms, to get the job done. And the job doesn't mean that everything's going to be fixed, everything's going to come back to normal. It just means that to bring some stability back to this country, you know, trying to move us progressing financially, to have a surplus per se. So that in itself, the idea now of talking about only 4 years, honestly, like I said before and over, that any person who's new, maybe if it's Romney coming to office, or even after this next 4 years, to think about that they're going to have a budget to play with, to have gridlock that we have right now in Congress is a joke. Because the reality is that it takes 4 more years. And like President Clinton has said, he was just getting started after the first 4 years. So when you have your footing good, you know, you're heading straight, knowing what direction it takes to have this country move forward from what you've seen 4 years ago, it is necessary, you know. And again, it's no push, you know, for President Obama or less, but it's an understanding that with the self-conscious decision, you know, you're in a position that you know your job, you know what you're doing better, you know, you've gotten better at it versus someone new, and all the crises, other issues. And even recently, I just saw the last debate, you know, Romney didn't make a good case for himself to know foreign policy. So do you want to start at 4 more years of a new presidency with all these ongoing issues, whether or not to take the military out of Afghanistan and move us out of, you know, all these wars and ending this continuous war, or adding other surpluses to the military, you know, which is more spending money. Because when you look at the bottom line, our country, home, needs help too. It's not just about fighting wars overseas. You know, home is where it's at, and home needs its support, its troops, its commitment to the growth of the economy, the United States of America's economy, not just everybody else's needs. So let's focus on taking care of home. America, the choice is yours. You make the difference not necessarily by your vote, but by your decision to take action and create your own job and your own financial freedom. I am Dimitri Frederick, signing off, and you've been watching Voices for the Voiceless. As always, I hope you have been enlightened, empowered, and definitely have been educated. Take care, and God bless.